right. Hello, everybody. How are all my AP World History people doing? This is Mrs. Hall here. Before we get started, I want to make sure that you have completed the first 5 document sample that I posted for you last week on Friday. So it's the one on Latin America and Christianity. So this one had been modified. It's a sample one that I've had, but it's been modified to 5 documents for the 2020 DBQ AP World History Modern exam. Okay, so before you watch this video, you need to go and actually download that off of Mrs. Hall's website. Okay, you do that for Friday the 24th, April the 24th, and you need to follow the directions. And remember, we're just doing a practice on this one. Okay, we haven't written this one yet. This is just a practice. So today's video, we're going to be going over that practice, and it's a chance for you to kind of review how that practice went, how the planning went. Now, normally when you do your planning, you're going to do about 10 minutes, okay? But for these practices, I'm going to have you do 15 minutes, and that's because I'm having you do a little bit extra. I'm having you do contextualization, I'm having you do outside source, I'm having you do SOAPs, a few extra things to give a little bit more of a complete picture of what the essay would look like, to give a better idea of how many points you might earn. So just brainstorming. What do you come up with? And if you're on target with what I'm going over, then that's a good sign that you might get the points. And if you're off target of what I'm going over, then that's a sign that you probably wouldn't get the points. So traditionally with planning, you would only spend about 10 minutes, right? And you would analyze the documents and you would group them, okay? So you would analyze those documents, you would find your source, you would find your group, and then you would group them, and then you would start writing. But I'm having you do those couple extra things in those extra 5 minutes just to get a better idea without writing the essay. Would you get contextualization? Would you get outside source, those 2 points? Would you get those SOAPs points, okay? So here we go. So we're going to go through the 5 documents. We're going to read the prompt. We're going to go through the 5 documents. We're going to talk about grouping, contextualization, outside source, and SOAPs. Anything I don't cover, feel free to email me if you feel like something that you did, you feel like it would count. By all means, clarify it, okay? Because we are getting close to the AP exam, and you want to know, am I right, or do I need to go back and start doing more review? Remember, these practices are so valuable. It's not just about doing the documents, okay? It's about reviewing content as well. People have been asking me, well, are we going to get, is the DBQ we're going to get one of the DBQs you're going to give? No. The DBQ you're going to get on the AP exam, I'm sure, will be something different. In fact, they've hinted that the DBQ you're going to get on the AP exam will be more of a global question, that it'll incorporate probably several different locations or different regions, some kind of interaction, because it's a one-hit essay this year. You're not having multiple questions and things this year. But the good thing about doing these practice DBQs is going through the motion. 45 minutes to write a DBQ is not a lot of time, and if you don't practice, you are going to struggle, and your chances of passing will be greatly reduced. So going through the practice, not only content-wise, is going to be really good, but becoming more and more efficient, and then learning from those mistakes each time you do them. So here we go. Okay, so the prompt was evaluate the extent to which Christianity changed societies in Latin America in the period of 1500 to 1800. Okay, so first thing you got to do, right, before we ever look at the prompt, before we ever look at the documents, we have to look at the prompt, and we need to evaluate what is it asking us to do. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to know the grouping off the bat. Now, first thing we got to do is we have to decide, is this prompt suggesting, giving, or completely leaving open what the groups are going to be, okay? So evaluate the extent to which Christianity changed societies in Latin America from the period of 1500 to 1800. So think about it for a sec. Is it partial? Is it giving it to you? Or is it totally suggested? Okay, it's a partial, right? It's telling you, you are evaluating what? The extent, okay? So we know we're evaluating, the documents are going to talk about Christianity in Latin America, and you're going to see different extents to which Christianity will impact Latin America from 1500 to 1800. So think about just what do we know 1500 to 1800, okay? So before you even get into the documents, 1500 in Latin America, we know that exploration age is starting, okay? Who is coming in with exploration age? Who started exploration age? Think about it. The Spanish, what religion are they bringing? Catholicism, right? Okay, so a big part of colonization is not just economic and political, but it's also cultural, right? Cultural imperialism, that they're coming and they're conquering. And we know today that Catholicism from Latin South America is dominant. So the extent of which it's going to have an impact on society will be varying, but we know just by today's standards that it's a great extent. So levels of extent, so you could see full immersion or cultural diffusion, you could see rejection, you could see partial, you could see people maybe going against it, you could see missionaries. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you could see, right? So those are maybe just some things to kind of keep in mind. Now, how do I come up with grouping? Okay, so remember some tips to look for. Always start with source. Let me say that again. Your best friend is source. Anyone who skips source is not smart. I'm just going to say it, all right? You want to work smarter, not harder? Source, okay? Your best friend. Then, as you're skimming the document, right, finding or looking for that quote, what sums up the document, what shows you extent of how Christianity changed, to what extent did Christianity. So are you seeing rejection? Are you seeing full immersion? Are you seeing acceptance? Are you seeing a trial? Are you seeing an inquisition? Like, what are you seeing, okay? Are you seeing missionary work? What are you seeing? Okay, so find a quote or something that shows that extent, all right? Summarize it off to the side, and then put your element of so. So maybe you think, oh, speaker might be good, or occasion might be good, or audience might be good, or purpose might be good, okay? And then as you're summarizing, maybe off to the side, put your general assumption of what extent it might be. And then when you go to group, then you can look for those trends, okay? So as we're looking for this, as we go through each document, we'll kind of summarize what kind of extent do we see. Do we see acceptance of Christianity? Do we see rejection of Christianity? Do we see cultural diffusion? Like, what things do we see? And then at the end, we look for those patterns. All right, here we go, document 1. Okay, so document 1, source. This is a record of a confession, all right, from a Domingos Nombre. It is a Brazilian man of mixed European Amerindian ancestry, and he's in an Inquisition trial. Okay, so we know the Inquisitions. Remember, think back to the Protestant Reformation. We tend to think of the Inquisitions as a European things, right? The reaction of the Protestant Reformation started by Martin Luther in 1519, 1521 to his 95th thesis, and the Catholic Church's response to that. But the Inquisitions happened also in the Americas, and the Inquisitions were basically religious trials, right? Okay, where you were put on trial by the church. And if you remember the witch hunts, how did these usually end? Sometimes people got off, but how did most of them end? You guys remember? Burning at the stake, killing people, like, these were not cool things, okay? So Inquisitions is a court, it's a religious court, okay? So a recorded confession of someone of mixed descent, it's a man, okay, and he's on trial. So this is probably a man who has messed up or has been wrongly accused or has done something. And if you think back to the primary resources we've read this year, we read about, remember, some of these inquisitions and people who were confessing, okay? So this is a defendant, and he's confessing that 20 years ago, he went into the wild of Brazil. The company was looking for gold, and he practiced customs of heathens. He confessed that 16 years ago, he was ordered to a region of a captain to bring back native slaves. While there, he painted his bodies in a heathen way. He danced around. He played music. So here's probably what happened. He probably was sent out to do business, and to make business go easier, he fit in with the locals and kind of, you know, practiced a little cultural diffusion, you know, kind of like played nice. But in the church's eyes, any sort of playing nice is going against your religion, right? They didn't take that as that you were all or nothing, very black and white. And so this could be taken as going against your religion, aka he's against his religion, now he's on trial for his life. So they're making him sound like he's a terrible person, all right? So to what extent do we see the impact of Christianity? We see an inquisition, we see a court, we see someone on trial for their Christian faith, right? This is a really big deal. So I like, for a quote, I like the fact he painted his body in a heathen way. He danced around. You could say he practiced the custom of the heathens. Those are a couple of things that you could show, you know, to show what he's being accused of. Definitely in source, he's an inquisition. His mixed background, that's definitely going to make him at a disadvantage. Most likely the inquisitions are being run by white Europeans or people of European descent. So being of mixed ancestry, that's going to racially hurt you, especially in the 1590s. So think about that. What the social hierarchy look like. So I would summarize this off to the side. This is a man who is on trial for his heathen ways, probably out doing business, trying to fit in. And for a kind of grouping, I might put on trial, Inquisition, you know, on trial for heathen ways against Christianity, something to that extent, okay? All right, let's keep going. Document 2. Okay, document 2, look at source. This is a testimony. So testimony, when you hear the word testimony, what atmosphere or context do you think of? A trial. Oh my gosh, are we starting to see a trend here? A trial. So this is testimony of a captain in the Inquisition trial of Pinta, a free black woman in Brazil. So from Angola in Brazil. So it is a captain who is testifying against a free black woman from Angola, but in Brazil. Okay, so it's a man testifying against a woman. Now, think back to the witch trials. Ooh, is this ringing a bell for anybody? Maybe outside source possibilities? Let's come back to that, but just think about that, okay? So here's what he says. I saw Louisa at the home. There was a small altar in the canopy. She had a carved knife in her hand. She wore a large ribbon tied. Keep going. She was singing with them and 2 other black women, also from Angola, and their African man playing a small tambourine for 2 hours, playing and singing. Keep going. There she cured lying down on the floor. She stepped over them on this occasion. Here we go. Okay, second to last line. She also cursed the wife. And I also heard many times that she called to other towns to cure people. Oh, she cured the wife. Sorry, not cursed. Cured the wife. And other times had cured. Now, curing people, this would be considered like black magic or, you know, local customs. This definitely would not be okay with the Catholic Church. Okay, this would be considered witchcraft, you know, or something like that, black magic, a shaman or something like that. This would never be considered okay in the eyes of the Catholic Church. And in fact, when you look at native customs and traditions, shaman in Latin American, South American culture is still practiced or is still a common native custom or tradition. Okay, so what quote would I use? I like the, he also cured the wife, the second to last line, you know, that she went to other towns and cured them, the curved knife, wore a ribbon, singing other black women, small tambourine, you know, playing music, you know, all these different things, trying to make it sound very heathen, very tribal, very shaman-esque, you know, black magic type thing. Insight here, male against a female, you know, so right there you have the patriarchal society. Women are not given as much credit, so that already is going to hurt her. This captain, they don't give his race, but definitely being the fact they emphasize a free black woman, that race, so not only is her gender going to be against her, but her race is going to be against her as well. So for grouping, again, what extent do we see? So the extent we see is, again, a black woman on trial for violating Christianity. It's not saying she was ever a Christian, but she's going against the Christian faith, so she's being held accountable for that, right? And somebody's testifying against her. So for grouping, I would put court or, you know, going against the Christian faith, rejecting the Christian faith, so that, which certainly isn't going to go well. Okay, document 3. Source. So this is this is the picture, so it's on the next page because there wasn't enough space on the slide. So just really quick, the picture to the left is a picture from Incan mythology, and then the picture on the right is of Adam and Eve. So I'm going to go to the next slide and we'll talk about these. Okay. So the picture on the left is supposed to be kind of an early origins of humans from Incan mythology or Incan early religious mythology. And then the picture on the right is supposed to be Adam and Eve, which from Christianity, the biblical standpoint, Adam and Eve being the first humans created by God. Okay, so when you look at these, what's really interesting is that Incas, being a Latin America, you know, native religion, the way that it's being depicted, and then Adam and Eve being a, you know, originally Middle East, right, going to Europe and then coming over through cultural diffusion and assimilation into Latin America. Very interesting the way that they're depicted. Would you say that they're similar, different? I don't know about you. Very different. Very, very different. Not just, oh my goodness, what am I saying? Very similar. I know you're going, Miss Hall, what is going on with you? You've been in quarantine for too long, okay? You're losing your marbles. No, very, very similar. I mean, really down to the nitty gritty. Eve has, you know, some children there. Cain and Abel, you know, and stuff like that, and you got the chickens going around, but other than that, it's basically the same picture, right? Okay, so what I find really interesting is that the depictions over time of early England mythology and early Christian mythology are in essence kind of the same. So what I think that this shows is to what extent is Christianity having an impact in Latin America is we're seeing cultural diffusion or assimilation, the way that we're projecting Christianity to natives, or the way that we're trying to project Christianity in a very similar way that Incan mythology was projected, so that natives are comfortable with it, if that kind of makes sense. And when you look at these pictures, there's a real familiarity. If you're a native and you're interested in Incan, or you're familiar with Incan roots and religion, then seeing this Christian Adam and Eve portrayal is actually going to feel very comfortable and very similar to your early mythology of Incan mythology. So for grouping, I like the idea of cultural diffusion, assimilation. I like the idea of that they're very similar, that it is, you're trying to appeal, you're trying to make it comfortable, you're trying to draw in the natives over to Christianity. Obviously, there isn't a quote because it's a picture. Your source is very insightful, though, right, of telling you what these things are. And then obviously looking at them, you would come up with grouping and to see to what extent the impact Christianity is having on Latin America. Okay, document 4. Let's look at the source, okay? So this is, Native American from the town in Mexico, witness testimony in a court case concerning religious ceremonies being performed in Batada. So, oh my goodness, so witness testimony again in a court. So we have another court case, witness testimony, okay, in Mexico. And this time it's interesting. It's not necessarily talking about a person, but it's talking about concerning religious ceremonies, okay? So here it goes. During the communal idolatries, the town's native elders sacrificed 2 or 3 deer and many turkeys and dogs. They confessed to the town's native heathens priests making, okay, so this is clearly a confessional that there is heathen practices going on, right? This is an account when they say idolatries, when they talk about deer and turkeys, when they talk about heathen priests, these are all things indicating that these are not Christian customs, right? That these are things outside the Christian faith that they're condemning, okay? You go to the second paragraph. When the sacrifice is over, everyone comes to a place. The ceremony performs on their knees. They come to sacrifice. The town people purchase candles for money they have paid, hold the sacrifice. A large feather is usually adorned the image of Our Lady. I mean, so they go on and on. So it sounds like there's a lot of things going on that are going against the Christian faith, that are tying to the native customs of, Mexico religious mythology and things like that. So, quote, let's see, what kind of quote do we like? I like, really, there's just so many, anything referencing sacrifice, idols, heathen, heathen priests, the sacrificing, really anything in that first paragraph, you could really, any of those you could kind of quote, it makes the point pretty clearly, okay? The source is really insightful again for grouping. What extent of impact do we see? Well, we see again that the extent of impact is that in Mexico, people are being put on trial for the Christian faith for not following it, okay, in a way like an inquisition. And so again, we see, a court case or an inquisition, or, people being held accountable in the Christian courts and in trouble for not following the Christian faith, for following their customs. So in a way, people rejecting the Christian faith and being held accountable to it in a court of law. Okay. Document 5, our last one. Again, this was an image one. So again, the source is here and then the image is on the next one. There just wasn't enough room for everything here. So the source is a saint, okay, Palermo, Benedict of Palermo, holding the infant Jesus. This is a statue of Our Lady, Rosary of the Black people, Salvador, Brazil, circa 1750, all right? So this is Benedict of Palermo, which is a saint of the African ancestry who lived in Italy in the 16th century, all right? And this ties to the rosary and things like that. So what I find really interesting is that there's ties back to Italy, there's ties back to African ancestry, okay? But also that this statue is in Brazil. So let's look at the statue, okay? Wow. All right. So when you look at the saint, All right, this is where it's like the elephant in the room, and you're kind of like, so what stands out about this saint that would not be typical at the time? All right, I'm going to say it. Yes, the saint is black. And that would not be typical at the time. But when you look at the population of Brazil, Brazil had the highest population of African slaves, okay? And Christianity, due to slavery and the Portuguese and the sugarcane plantation, things like that, was huge there. In fact, one of the last places for slavery to go away was in Brazil. This shows you assimilation. It shows cultural diffusion. It shows the acceptance of Christianity, so much so culturally idolizing it in your own race, in your own ideology, okay? Back in Europe, you're not going to see these images. You're not going to see these images. Why? Because white Europeans are putting forth Christianity, right? And so you're not going to see them putting a different race up on that. And you even see it with the representation of the baby Jesus, right? They are different races, okay? And so this shows you an assimilation of the saints that people of Brazil, which the population at that time is going to be dominantly African ancestry, darker skin, black skin, okay? And that the saints that they are holding dear are going to mirror their image. So it shows an acceptance of Christianity, an extent of an acceptance of Christianity, which is great. And even the saints that they're showing, not representing European white heritage, but African darker heritage, yet the baby Jesus having lighter skin. So I think this is a really interesting, telling picture of the extent of the impact of Christianity in Latin America, in Brazil, and the extent, especially that African ancestry or people of African heritage, African slaves, really to be specific, are assimilated and have been forced to convert and have converted to Christianity over centuries. So for grouping, I would put something like, I think this greatly shows assimilation, cultural diffusion, of people of, most likely slaves, people of, even if, like they said, African ancestry, and you can see that in the skin color, representing what is dominantly a European white ancestry religion, especially at this time. So for grouping, I would put something like that, okay? For summing it up to the side, I would again make note of that difference in race, but then how significant it is that they would create a statue, a saint that they look up to. And in the Catholic religion, or in the sect of Christianity, of Catholicism, saints are really, really important, in addition to Jesus and the Mother Mary and things like that. Okay, so grouping, here's what I would do. Okay, so I would have some kind of group about inquisitions or courts. You have 3 from sourcing. Remember I said at the very beginning, sourcing is your best friend. That's where you look, okay? Now, it doesn't guarantee, but it is such a great place to start. You can find themes, whether it be locations or titles of people or what's going on, and you can find trends, and we found trends there, okay? So I would do an inquisition or courts type group where we have 1, 2, and 4, all of them inquisitions, courts, testimonies, putting people on trial for different offenses against the church, right, for not practicing Christianity. And then I would do a cultural diffusion or assimilation group with documents 3 and 5 pictures. Document 3 showing the Inca mythology and then the Christian mythology and how similar they were. And the reason for that, the portrayal of Adam and Eve looking so similar to Inca mythology to appeal to natives. And then in document 5, like we just talked about, I think really significant, showing those of African heritage have at this point lost or abandoned their African ancestry as far as religious practices, and have embraced or have adopted at this point Christianity, European religion, and have even at that point now are embracing saints that are not of European image but are of their own racial heritage. And I think that again shows cultural diffusion and assimilation that you really can't deny. So both of these show an appeal to people living in Latin America in a great extent. 3 and 5 do that, and then 1, 2, and 4 have a similar thing of the authority that the Catholic Church has in Latin America at this point. Whether you like it or not, they are in charge. They have the authority, and that's a great part of that due to European authority. So in this case, there is no need for a third group. So when we talked about last week, do we have a third group or not? It really all comes down to that fifth document, okay? So we know we're going to have two groups, 2 documents each, and on the new rubrics, that's what they're looking for. Now, you have 2 choices with that fifth document, okay? You can, in this case, if it fits well with one of the 2 groups, then just put it with that. So if you were to outline this essay, you would have an intro and 2 body paragraphs. So you would basically have 3 paragraphs. That's it. Let's say that that fifth document didn't work. Let's say document 4 wasn't a picture that showed cultural diffusion, and let's say it wasn't a courts document. Let's say it was just something really random. Then you could do a third random one, put it on its own extent or its own grouping, and then you could do a 4th paragraph. So you'd have an intro, 2 body paragraphs, and then that 3rd body paragraph would be short and only with that one single document, okay? And you would still be okay with grouping, because with grouping, they're only looking for 2 because they've shortened it, okay, where traditionally they were looking for 3. So what's changed is that last document, you'll either have one that stands alone, meaning you can't really put it with the other 2, so put it alone so it doesn't confuse your other groups, or if you can comfortably, which in this case you can, put it with one of your 2 groups, then you only have 2 groups, which means you only need 2 body paragraphs. So I hope that makes sense, okay? Okay, SOAP's ideas, okay? These are just some ideas of what I would do, okay? So for document 1, because this is a direct confession, I think speaker could work or audience could work. Speaker in particular, why is this person confessing? What would motivate them to confess? Who are they speaking to? So I think that you could easily do speaker, the point of view of the person confessing, or who they are speaking to. Document 2, now this is interesting. This was the captain giving testimony on that free Black woman. So I think in this case, audience would be very interesting. I think occasion or purpose, though, would be really good. I don't think speaker would necessarily work. I like occasion because I think you could really talk about the patriarchal society. Purpose, I think you could really talk about, you could really get into femininity here, patriarchal society. You could talk about the witch hunts here. You could talk about the lack of the racial issues, or you could talk about the gender issues. So I really think that there's some possibilities to use occasion and purpose there to talk about the racial disparity or the gender disparity, or both. Really, in both of those cases, that the fact she was a free Black woman without a male supervision, we've talked about that in Europe, the same thing would apply. And the fact that she was a female and a free Black female, she is in that time in the 1600s, she is from a European white perspective is going to have no respect, unfortunately. And so that could be a very interesting SOAPs conversation. Okay, document 3, that was the 2 pictures. So I think audience could be really interesting because you could be talking about the natives, so the appeal to the natives of why the portrayal of Adam and Eve would be so similar to the Incan portrayal. Purpose, again, could totally tie into that. The purpose, to make it familiar, to make it easy, to make it, oh, it's not that different from my native mythology. Or occasion, which is the Spanish trying to make it easier for them to convert people, trying to make it easier for them. So any of those kind of angles, it's here's what it is, they look similar, right? So the SOAPs would be, why are they doing it? Why do they look so similar? And that is, in any of these cases, the audience is the native, and the purpose and occasion is the Spanish trying to convert the natives and trying to make it easier on themselves, right? Okay, and then document 4, again, this was another testimony in court. This is on the ceremonies. Again, purpose or occasion, I think showing that the people of Mexico are very resistant to converting to Christianity. They're still very much holding on to their customs. And you could also then talk about the extent of which the Catholic Church is trying to root that out. They're trying desperately to root that out. And then document 5 is, again, the picture of the saint who represents African heritage, who is Black, holding a lighter skinned baby Jesus. So the audience of that definitely is the slaves of Brazil, which make up a huge portion of the population. Purpose, I think, again, to show the assimilation, the cultural diffusion, the abandonment of African ancestry due to enslavement and forced abandonment. I'm not saying that this was by choice by any means, but over time and missionary work and just being separated in generations, that's been lost, and Christianity has been imposed upon them, and how much it has been impressed upon them. Okay, Contextualization. So remember, that is background information. So what kind of background information would I give? Okay, so I would give 4 or 5 things. So these are things leading up to Christianity in Latin America, 1500 to 1800. So this is anything leading up to or giving information about Christianity in Latin America, or the extent of Christianity in Latin America. So anything about exploration age would work. So anything about the Spanish conquistadors running into this exploration age, the Portuguese, Christopher Columbus, any of those missionaries going over trying to convert people, Catholic Church, Western Europe, looking for direct routes to Europe, African slave trade, colonization, Columbian exchange. Remember, Columbian exchange isn't just about the transfer of goods, it's ideas, and religion was a huge part of that. Language, plantation mining society. So you know, the colonization, which was motivated by the plantation mining society, which led to slavery, and then the conversion of people. The white man's burden, right, that they had the right religion and it was their burden to convert these natives, starting with the Amerindians and then eventually African slaves, right? Because, and I'm saying all this with quotes, right? You know, they don't know any better. Remember, we've talked a lot about that in class, the 3 Gs, you know, God, glory, gold. Again, the Spanish, the conquistadors, Protestant Reformation, I think that ties in the Inquisitions, you know, the rebellion against the Catholic Church, that the Catholic Church really trying to hold on to and not putting up with. No. So they're not putting up with it in Europe from white Europeans. They're definitely not going to take rejection from natives. They're not going to take rejection from other races. So I'm just saying, think about that for a second. If you're racist and you're prejudiced and you're going to kill someone the same race as you and you're not going to put up with them rejecting your religion, then you're definitely not going to put up with someone of another race rejecting your religion. So therefore, explaining why the Inquisitions and the testimonies are not only happening in Europe, but are also happening, as you see in 3 documents, in Latin South America as early as the 1500s all the way through the 1700s. They were determined. First, they're like, oh, we'll try to convert you, and if you won't, then we will put you on trial and we'll convince you to convert, and if you won't convert, we'll burn you at the stake and we'll convince others to convert. You know what I mean? Just like the witch hunts back in Europe. Someone burning at the stake is a very PR effective moment, right? For convincing people, yeah, I think we're going to go along with this, because nobody wants to burn. Okay, and last but not least, outside source ideas. So remember, some of this will be repetitive from contextualization. So contextualization could be more broad. It could be how people got to the Americas, how Christianity got there. Outside source really has to be tied to religion itself, okay? So it has to be tied more directly to the topic. And remember, the outside source, you need to have 2, all right? An outside source you can't repeat with contextualization. The outside source has to be more on topic. Now, it can't be from the documents, right? So you can't repeat what's in the documents, but it has to directly to relate to it. So here we go. Anything about Protestant Reformation, so Martin Luther, 95th Thesis, the Inquisitions, the Catholic Church, the witch hunts, anything about that would be awesome. So if you said anything about Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther, 95th Thesis, the witch trials, things like that, A+ to you. I'm clapping, that's great. If you didn't, why not? That is really disappointing. That means that your timeline review, you did not do a very good job. Okay, this is where knowing your content, knowing your stuff, so to speak, you know what I mean, is so important. This is one, if you missed it, that is not cool. All right, you got to go back. You've got to do a better job. It's really unacceptable. White man's burden, another really great one. They justified it because they thought God had blessed them, right? So it was not only their right, but their duty to put these people on trial. So with any of the Inquisition ones or trial ones, anything about the Protestant Reformations, how these trials came about, the white man's burden, how they justified putting people on trial would be excellent. How did religion get there? Missionaries, schools, churches that they were building would be really good. Role of missionaries, they are the ones really on the front lines. That they tried at first to convert people, and they tried to do this, you know, nicely. And then when people wouldn't, they forced them. This was not a choice. The white man's burden, they didn't just see it as their duty, but their right. And when you see something as your burden, no, God is making you do this. Okay, it's not just that, oh, it's my right to do it. No, you don't understand. God is making me do this. They saw it as like their burden. And so putting people on trial, you don't understand, God's making me do this. So that is truly how they saw it. If you fast forwarded to today and you said, because of these inquisitions or because of these assimilations, and you tied it really to any of those doctrines to talk about how Catholicism is the #1 religion even today in Latin South America, excellent connection due to those inquisitions, due to the unrelenting white European pressure. We see through the inquisitions, convert or die, but we also see like in document 5, where we have, an African, a black saint, we see the assimilation. So we see both sides of this, convert or die, basically. Get on board or be put on trial. The conquistadors coming, the Spanish coming, directly bringing, the 3 Gs. God wanted them to do this. The witch hunts. Oh my gosh, the witch hunt would be such a great discussion. Okay, these single women, they talk about it almost directly in that second document, right? The free black woman. And they talk about how she was curing people, which in Latin America would be more like a shaman, but basically describing like a witch in European society. So that would be an excellent outside source reference. I'm talking about the European equivalent of that, again, tying into the Protestant Reformation. And we even looked at primary resources for that this year. Are there more? There could be more. So anything, here's the difference. So contextualization could be things leading up to. So that could be more general of just exploration, trade, Europeans seeking trade routes, how they got there, and then how religion got there. Outside source, it has to directly tie to the topic, which is religion. So your outside source, contextualization can be a little bit looser, which could involve economics or colonization. But for outside source, both of them really have to tie to religion or women or gender or assimilation, all these kinds of things that I'm talking about. So it has to be more directly on topic, which is the extent of the impact of Christianity, right, in Latin South America. All right, so email me with any questions if I didn't cover it, if you're not sure on something. If you were on point with a lot of things that I was talking about, good for you. That's not only a sign that you're doing well reviewing, planning with the DBQs, but that your content reviews are coming through. If you did well on the planning as far as like grouping, but let's say you did not do well in contextualization outside source, then you need to go back and you need to review the timeline a lot more, okay? We're going to be doing another DBQ this week. So we're going to do a couple of things for the next couple of days. We're going to do another DBQ. We're going to write a DBQ in a week. So we're going to get more and more practice with this. But these things are so important. And I'm telling you, content is just as important as practicing these DBQs. So email me with any questions, and we'll talk soon. You guys have a great day.